You're listening to In the Chair, a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. Find out more at masonicpodcast.com. But first, welcome your host, Robert Bone.
Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and I hope you're having a great day wherever and wherever you're listening to this. And once again, this is, of course, In the Chair, a podcast about Freemasonry for anyone who is a Freemason or just wants to find out a little bit more about it. Whether you're in England, whether you're in the UK, or indeed anywhere else around the world, wherever you've got an internet connection and an interest in finding out about Freemasonry, then you're free to download this podcast. And I'm your host, Robert Bone, and many thanks for hitting the download button and listening in. I've got a great episode lined up with a great interviewee, though you've probably already heard a few times on here. But before I get into that, I just want to say make sure you stick around to the end of the podcast, because I've got quite an important announcement to make. So I'll do that as a little bit of a teaser, but I'm pretty sure you are going to stick around to the end of this one, because actually it is a great interview that we've got today. And I know, you're probably thinking, well, that's typical. Of course you're going to say that. But I genuinely do think it is. Every time I do a podcast, people always say to me that, no matter what the subject is, they always learn at least one thing from it, something to take away. And today's interview is no exception. Well, if it is an exception, it's going to mean you're going to be learning a lot more than one thing. It's going to cover a subject that, if you are already in Freemasonry, it's probably something that, a phrase that you've heard, which is about the liberal arts and sciences. And it's one of those phrases that you've probably heard. You might have even heard what the breakdown of those are, but it's not really covered anymore in the ceremonies themselves. So today we're going to be looking into that in a lot more detail, and we're going to welcome back Ruben Ayres. Now, Ruben, if you're a listener and you've listened to more than a couple of these, you've probably heard before. He's been on about 3 episodes so far. He was first on episode 17 when we just discussed an overall history of Freemasonry, looking back in Freemasonry as a whole. Come on again on episode 27 when we were talking about the value of Freemasonry and what people, I guess, get from it personally. And then once more, which wasn't too long ago actually, which was on podcast 30, when we looked into the history of the Masonic ritual and really delved into where the Masonic ritual sort of come from and how it's evolved over the hundreds of years. Best way if you haven't heard those, you can find them on the website, and of course go onto iTunes. Make sure you hit subscribe and you can download those last ones, or go onto the website. If you go onto masonicpodcast.com/32, because this is episode 32, there's the show notes on there, which obviously gives a bit more detail to what we're talking about as well as links onto those other ones. So if you haven't heard those already, please make sure you download those and have a listen. To go back to that, I'm going to be making a bit of an announcement at the end of the show, just to give you a bit of an idea. This one, episode 32, is probably going to be the end of series 1. I'm going to be taking a bit of a break over summer, but regarding series 2, what I'm going to be doing, make sure you listen to it at the end, because I'm probably going to be needing a bit of your help. And yes, that's you who I'm talking to. But before we go into that, we're going to have the interview. So talking about the liberal arts and sciences, please welcome back to In the Chair, Ruben Ayres. Please welcome back to In the Chair. It's his 4th time back here, so he's obviously doing something right. Ruben Ayres, and of course Ruben, if you don't know by now, is a member of St George Lodge, and they meet in Exeter. That's part of the province of Devonshire, down in Devon, and he's also the provincial grand orator for the province. So Ruben, many thanks and welcome back to In the Chair.
Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Yeah, you're the most comeback person, if that makes sense. You're pretty much you're almost pretty much a co-presenter of the podcast now. So I appreciate all the times that you're coming back on. But I must say, each time we talk, I say I learn is an understatement, and I'm pretty confident that the listeners to the podcast are also getting a lot out of this. It's one of those things, and I sometimes find this. I've had there's one chap who listens to the podcast. He's been a Freemason for quite a while now, and he says every time he listens to the podcast, he's, no matter what the episode is, he says he always learns something.
Yeah, well, me too.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where what some people can take for granted, and it's actually surprising. I find that I sometimes learn things by actually teaching someone else.
Yeah,
And
absolutely right.
I will sometimes have a conversation with, maybe it's another guest, or maybe it's just someone in my lodge, one of the younger members maybe, and they're talking to me, and they're having a bit of a problem trying to learn some of the ritual, and they ask me a question, and I try to explain it, and as I'm explaining it, by trying to blag it a little bit, but I don't want to, oh, well, I think that's something, and then suddenly something clicks, and I'm finding that, especially when, talking to yourself as well, it's you learn about things by talking about them. Something that actually Freemasons don't tend to do that much. When we do get together, we just tend to be trying to practice the words that we've got. But people are learning quite a bit from the podcast, which is always a good sign. And before, of course, you were on the show before. The first time you gave us all the summary about Freemasonry, and we called that Freemasonry 101. And then we looked again into the value of Freemasonry. And last time, we then started digging into the ritual. You gave us a bit of an overview, a history of the ritual. Very interesting, and sort of come to the conclusion that we're not too sure what the history of the ritual is, but there's definitely is very rich in history, and it's just we can't be definitive on what that actual history is.
Indeed.
And one of the things which is actually quite a big bit of the ritual, especially if you've got to learn it, which I haven't yet. A chap in my lodge, Kennett Lodge, has learnt it. He does it very well, and I remember being a fellow craft and him doing this to me, which is the second degree tracing board. It goes through a lot there. One of the things that it does talk about is the 7 liberal arts and sciences. I remember that it might involve something about astronomy. That's pretty much as far as I remember about that one. Have I got the right bit of ritual there? Am I thinking of the right thing?
I think you are.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So in that case, we're going in the right direction. So, of course, I could probably spend the next, hour talking about this perfectly myself, but just for variety, Reuben, just so everyone else can hear it, find out a bit, could you just explain to maybe all the rest of the listeners, of course, what exactly those 7 liberal arts and sciences are?
Okay, sure. Well, in fact, it's mentioned first at the end of the first degree ceremony.
Right.
And there's a part towards the end where it said it's expected that you'll make such of the liberal arts and sciences your future study.
Ah, I remember, yes.
And then, as you say, it then is explained in a little more detail in the second degree ceremony as to what the 7 liberal arts and sciences are, although it doesn't go into any particular detail. But the 7 liberal arts and sciences are grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and, as you say, astronomy. And it isn't really explained in the Masonic ritual why those particular subjects should be brought together.
Yes.
Into a collection called the 7 Liberal Arts and Sciences. But there is a fascinating history behind them, which I could tell you a little bit about if you want.
Please do. Because, again, it's probably that list that people are familiar. When you read that list out, the chances are there's quite a few listeners to the podcast who recognise that list and are probably also going, yeah, I know those words. How do they apply in a Masonic point of view? So please do. Okay, well, they have a long, long history. And in fact, if you go back to 4th century BC, the ancient Greeks in the classical Greek world understood a curriculum of education that involved pretty much those subjects. It wasn't originally exactly that, but over the centuries it evolved into the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and they in fact became central to European university education throughout the Middle Ages. And they were the core subjects of a medieval university education throughout Europe and this country, right the way through to the 1700s, really. So those were core subjects that
people were taught. They were divided into two groups. The first group was called the trivium,
right,
which is grammar, rhetoric, and logic.
Okay.
And you can consider that a sort of brain training exercise.
Okay.
Grammar to express yourself clearly.
Yes.
Rhetoric to persuade others of your line of argument, and logic to structure your thinking and critical reasoning.
Sure.
In a proper fashion. So they would be taught first,
Okay.
and then you would go on to what was called the quadrivium,
Okay.
which was the other four: the arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy.
Right. Okay. So, which, I can sort of see that build those sort of basics. I mean, I guess nowadays you'd see it. I know we have lots of listeners around the world, so who might not be up to speed with the British national curriculum. But when someone's going through studying for their exams, their GCSEs around the ages of 15, 16, there's the core subjects that pretty much every child has got to take, plus the ones that they can specialise in.
Yeah.
And from looking at that list, it's really sort of building up the basics. So you're not, by learning those, and I guess this is why it's maybe done in the fellowcraft sort of part, you're building up a very good general knowledge base to build on. You're learning how to, as you say, how to write the words, how to express yourself, how to think logically, the basics of music. And I guess music is, actually part artistic, but also part sort of, part of a science, because it's there is a mathematics behind this, isn't there? With music, if you look from the scientific sort of point of view, to how music's put together. And so I'm just sort of looking at that list and seeing if you had a good basics in all of those, that's a good foundation to then specialise in. Yeah, and
I think you can consider that first three group, the grammar, rhetoric, and logic, as you say, as being essentially brain training. How to think clearly, how to critically evaluate ideas and arguments, and how to express them in a persuasive fashion. The other thing you mentioned, the way the other subjects overlap, you might think, well, why on earth is music in there? But as you say, music is mathematical, and you can define a musical scale in all sorts of ways. But probably the first way it was defined was on the basis of musical harmonics, and that's very, very mathematical.
Yes, that's the sort of like my thinking. You got that sort about the frequencies and how a note C, you've got a C note, but when you go up an octave, you're actually doubling the pitch each time, and there is there is the mathematical behind it. But also, if you don't understand the mathematics to music, some people can pick up an instrument and still have an ear for music. So I guess
intuitively,
you're coming from those sort of different angles. Astronomy, I'm guessing, is probably not so much. This is obviously before the telescope, but it's looking at the planets, and I'm guessing it probably is a bit more of the astrology side of it as well.
It would have been both, I think. And astronomy and astrology, certainly back in ancient Greek times and medieval times, overlap considerably, and then started to diverge more recently. But certainly the Greeks would have been aware of the orbits of the major planets, the orbiting of the moon about the Earth, and the mathematical relations that were involved there.
Yes, and of course, when talking about mathematics and Greek, of course, one of the big things we've got to talk about would be Pythagoras' and Pythagoras' theorem, which is, of course, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which is the immediate Pathmaster's dual, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yes. So, what some people look back to when they're in their maths class, when they were at school getting taught how to work out the length of a hypotenuse of a triangle. Well, of course, that was invented by a chap called Pythagoras, who was a Greek an intellectual. I would say intellectual. He pretty much done a bit of everything on that list, actually.
Yeah.
And of course, then that led to it being part of the Pathmaster's dual, which is the diagram of to the diagram of the triangle with the squares around to show how that mathematics works behind it. So
Indeed.
yeah, there's covering a lot of subjects in there, and that's why once we get to sort of fellowcraft stage in Freemasonry, that's what we're told to teach ourselves, isn't it? Those 7 liberal arts and sciences.
Yeah, and I think it's good advice, because, the grammar, the rhetoric and logic, very important to think clearly and express yourself clearly. And in fact, for the Greeks, rhetoric didn't have the same negative connotations that we have now. It was a positive thing in order to be able to construct a persuasive argument.
Well, actually, it's Greeks who really, how should we say, they invented, I'd say invented debate. But yeah, that was, they would. I just again have these visions of my old history classes at school, and that the textbooks of these, they're all standing around with bed sheets wrapped around them, talking about great philosophical debates. But that's sort of where Parliament and government and really sort of come from.
Absolutely,
in the grand historical context, of having the debates. So, and that's where people would debate for the sake of debate.
Yeah, as an end in itself.
And again, it's a useful skill, a very useful skill to have. I guess right from a salesman trying to sell a car through to, I'm sure through to someone who's trying to get their 5-year-old son to go to bed early. Being able to put forward a constructive argument to make your point clear as to why they should buy that car or go to bed early is, it's a useful skill to have, to put your points across.
Yeah, and it spans all walks of life, doesn't it? Your social life, your family life, certainly your professional life, politics, wherever you go, you can see people who can construct a persuasive argument, and people that aren't so good at that, and often out of the same material.
And that's the thing, is we think of it nowadays just purely from the political point of view. Rhetoric, we're looking at it, political rhetoric, people sort of debating and arguing, but actually if you break it down, it's a skill that everyone really should have. And by having that skill, I guess puts you is already going to put you on a higher level, I guess, than someone who hasn't. In a debate. Yes.
Yeah, so, it's not just spin; it's persuasive use of argument. That's got to be a good thing.
Definitely. So okay, so those some of the, we're sort of covering them. One of the things, actually, I'd say, although we're taught in the ritual, especially in that in that second degree tracing board, that those 7 liberal arts and sciences we are to make our future study, we're not really told much more than that about how we study them. Is that something that's covered in the ritual?
No, I don't think it is. And like so much in Freemasonry, people interpret these things differently. But if you take the last 4 there, arithmetic, in the modern sense, I suppose that would be interpreted as mathematics.
Yes.
And, mathematics in terms of an understanding of the world is absolutely central, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, and I guess the geometry, although, we look at that as maybe a branch of mathematics, you could probably look at it more of a practical engineering type side of things. Although back when it was, you had the operative masons who were literally going out building the stone and working and using Pythagoras's theorem to calculate when they were building their structures. Nowadays, I guess the more modern say we could look at that and more practical engineering, building building a suspension bridge. I guess it's applying the mathematics that you've learnt.
Yes, and also just seeing geometric principles. In the natural world, there's this lovely quote by Kepler, who said that geometry gave God the pattern by which he laid out the world.
Yes.
It's a lovely line. And you can study the natural world mathematically, you can study it geometrically, and there's obviously lots of overlap. But, you see those principles applied to the very, very small and to the very, very large.
Yes.
They're all pervasive, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, and also, well, Kepler was, just to explain, because some people thinking who's Kepler. He's the person who actually, Galileo sort of knew that things started orbiting. He knew things, moons went round. Then Copernicus, of course, realised that the sun was central to the solar system, but it was Kepler who actually realised that things went round in ellipses, and actually realised the mathematics that drives the solar system, actually that drives the universe.
Absolutely.
He realised that things didn't go round in perfect circles, which actually for him, and that goes exactly with the quote, because I know he was very, very convinced that it had to be, there was I think he took things in too much detail on some things and didn't realise that, things can work out a little bit by chance, but can still be explained by mathematics.
Yeah,
and
quite right.
And actually, he's someone like Kepler really shows how these liberal arts and sciences, can be applied.
They are, and they are at the cutting edge of certainly modern mathematics, modern physics, modern astronomy. The use of calculus, use of non-linear geometric systems and such like. Anybody that's looking into either nuclear physics or macro astronomy will use powerful mathematical tools to try to understand what's going on.
I mean, I've actually just realised we were talking about Kepler and building the solar system. We were there talking about the arithmetic and geometry. We'd actually forgot to mention that actually, of course, is astronomy as well. Talk about that crossover. Yes, and all of this, and then going back to grammar and rhetoric. Once you've worked it out, you then need to be able to explain it to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, although, they sound a bit arcane and not necessarily applicable to everyday life, but they're perfectly applicable and at the cutting edge, certainly cutting edge of science.
Yes. Yeah, it is the foundations. And I guess once you've got those foundations down, then if you have that natural talent to being a musician, then you can take full advantage of that. And you can explore that further. If you're more, biased towards the mathematical side of it, then you could be the next Johannes Kepler and start, looking at the gravity affecting the solar system.
Absolutely. And there's an interesting little overlap, in fact, between music and astronomy, and that goes back to the 1600s when the musical scales that were used then were more or less based on simple harmonics,
right?
Thirds and fifths and such like. And when people noticed that, some of those scales work well in some keys and sound pretty awful in other keys, they started trying to even out the intervals between the notes that are inherent in those old systems. But it was noted that the harmonic series was the same mathematical principles were applying there as applied to the orbits of the planets.
Right. Okay.
And at that point, various people turned around and said, well, if that mathematical series applies to music and it applies to orbits of the planets, that's not by chance.
Yes.
That's because God deemed it so. So don't go messing about with the musical scale.
Right. Yes. Okay, I mean, I'm aware of that. The distance, between planets, which actually, partly led to the discovery of Neptune and Uranus, because it followed that scale. Yeah, I think it actually turned out to be a bit more of a coincidence than actual fact. It's just the way how the planets had migrated in the solar system. It turns out, and that partly goes back to Kepler. I think Kepler was convinced about that relationship between them. Yeah. But by knowing those bits did lead to it. And I think anyone who probably is a bit more intelligent than probably the two of us combined, who's working on current nuclear, with nuclear physics and I'd say going right from quantum theory up to the grand themes of the universe, is terms that some people might have heard of, is like string theory, which is based on harmonics and about vibrations.
Yeah, so there they are.
And it's one of those crazy sort of things where these theories that were put forward hundreds of years ago actually maybe weren't completely correct, but there's whether, for some reason that's some of those other theories are now coming back in vogue. Just
they recur.
Applied differently starts actually opening up doors. As I say,
yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
I need to really get Stephen Hawking on to really explain that one in more detail.
Yeah, that would be good.
I'm not too sure he's a Freemason, though.
No, and I don't know his phone number.
No, if anyone knows Stephen Hawking and would like to get him on in the chair, please get in contact. You can tweet me at Masonic Podcast. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and of course, I think with Freemasonry, of course, you don't. When you go through the degrees and you go up to being a Master Mason, it's no one actually tests you to check that you've learnt about those, these 7 liberal arts and sciences. But I think it is raising your, the attention to, you've got to look into doing this, haven't you? And I guess it's partly some self-development going on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was very lucky, I think, when I joined St. George's, because a lot of this stuff goes over your head, doesn't it? And I think I was sufficiently lucky to have a number of people, senior Masons in that lodge, who just give me a little nudge and say, those 7 liberal arts and sciences, they sound all a bit quirky, don't they? But just have a little look below the surface, what's going on there, because, they're of greater relevance than you might think.
And yeah, and they apply, and partly I think it helps you become a better, more rounded person as well. Even if you're not going to be applying it, just to know if, and say for example, you're sat at a festive board and you happen to be sat next to the lodge organist who's there for the evening, or stepping in. He knows lots about music and you might not, but somehow if you know a bit of basics about music, even if it's popular music, you can still have a conversation with someone. You don't have to know music theory in order to talk about music.
No, it gives you some common ground, doesn't it?
Yes, and I think that's partly, maybe sometimes people think you've got to research these things, and taking that music one, yes, it just have a bit of a knowledge gives you the if you have some knowledge about something and then you know how to put it forward using grammar and rhetoric, you can suddenly make a conversation with people that you didn't know. I'm sure, actually looking at those, you're probably going to be able to, if you know a bit about each of those, you can pretty much find some common ground with anyone and have a conversation. Yeah.
They're absolutely right. And, I would say, although it sounds very quirky, but that little bit of ritual at the end of the first degree, just enjoining you to make the liberal arts and sciences your future study, or at least part of your future study, I think that's actually pretty good advice.
Yes. General, self-development is, learn these things, because that's something, or when I say learn, it's make yourself familiar with these things. Learning about them, being familiar is going to open you up. And I know I said it earlier, it's going to give you the foundation to build on, should you go other things. And to be honest, the Masonic ritual does probably, cover quite a few of those in brief details, just not obviously. Obviously grammar is going to be your learning, to read, and I know probably you pretty much learn how to read by that point, but you're learning to read and absorb and take and try and learn actually directly from the text. The rhetoric, yes, you're still learning. You're maybe not learning actually how to put an argument forward, but you're learning how to stand up in front of a room full of men who are all staring at you. And although you're learning a script, you're still presenting something. So when it actually comes to doing something else, when you do have to give a presentation at work, you've already done similar before in what can feel a bit more of a higher pressure situation. So I guess, by you're learning some of those bits and doing the skills. I mean, to be honest, I have a terrible singing voice, but having to sing the opening odes and those sort of things, I guess it helps.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
And and there's so many sort of lessons that I guess are buried away. And I'm sure if we really sort of sat down and thought about it, and I'm sure listeners now are maybe thinking about some of the other ones, and maybe they've been learning a bit of ritual recently, and they'll go, oh, actually, I didn't realise that, but that piece that I'm learning actually kind of covers some of those other elements as well. I'm sure if you look for it, it would be there.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that's right. And there are lots of bits of the ritual, aren't there, that just sound a little bit arcane,
Yes.
a little bit opaque. And the temptation, I think, is to learn the words because you've got to trot them out at some point, and not really explore what they mean. But there's just tons of this stuff in the ritual.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could take a page, not quite at random, but almost at random from the book and find something, more than one thing maybe, that's worthy of exploration.
I mean, I guess the working tools, especially, actually just thinking about it, the working tools and the first, actually all 3 degrees, all can be applied to geometry. That's basically what they are all for, aren't they? For working out, measuring, looking at angles, checking perpendiculars and levels, measuring it all. It's pretty much all the working tools are, by rights, used for geometry.
Absolutely right. Yeah, that's true.
They're there. So although, yes, you can then look at them and what they metaphorically mean as well, when you're actually starting off, they literally are there to turn the rough stone into the smoother stone and prepare it for someone else who can do something more with it until you're actually ready to learn those skills yourself.
Yeah, quite right. Yeah.
So that's thanks, Ruben, because of course what we're doing there is we're looking at things that I guess we haven't noticed before, or we've noticed and we've heard it said maybe by others. There might even be some listeners to this who have even had to learn those words and said them to candidates and lodge themselves, but have learnt them parrot fashion and not really explored what those 7 liberal arts and sciences are and how they can apply and how they can learn them and how they can use them themselves, and then try to use that to better themselves, for Masonic betterment, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely right. I agree.
Yeah, definitely. By you coming on has really sort of opened my eyes, and I'm sure when others are going to be reading through ritual, learning it themselves, they're going to be looking at those bits and interpreting it. And I'm sure next time they're sat in a lodge meeting and that phrase comes up, learning the 7 liberal arts and sciences, people's ears are going to open a little bit more and think, yes, spot those little seeds in there. What can we learn from it and how can we apply it?
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. And it's nice when people deliver ritual in a way that makes it clear that they know what they're trying to say.
Yes.
It's more satisfying to hear. It communicates an idea to the candidate rather than just some words that probably don't mean much if it doesn't mean much to the person that's saying them. Yeah. It's all a bit sterile if it's delivered parrot fashion, I think.
And I guess actually that's something that you don't learn in the ritual. That's rhetoric. That's what you actually learn by doing it and presenting the ritual.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And so actually that's probably one of those things where if you read the book, you probably won't find anything about it. You read it out loud and you start learning it to give it to people. Suddenly that's rhetoric. You're putting across what you're saying and letting other people hear it and absorb it and learn from it themselves.
Yeah, delivering something with meaning.
Exactly. And I think when you start mastering that, you master all the other bits of what all those bits mean. I mean, to be honest, we're last time round when we were talking about the history of Freemasonry, we were sort of almost like digging down into the layers of it. It's almost like now we're adding layers on top of it as well.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It's sort of like, you start digging down and now we're actually layering even more on top and going, well, actually, add these other bits onto it. And I'm sure you can, it's almost, that text is almost 3-dimensional. You can take it in so many different directions and still keep going in there. And as I said, I think I said last time round, if you just want to turn up and sort of sell some raffle tickets and enjoy the festive board, you're free to do that as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad church, isn't it?
It is, definitely. Ruben, well, I want to say many thanks once again for coming back on in the chair. As always, every time I talk to you, I genuinely, my eyes are genuinely opened. It's, some people say, they listen to the podcast and they learn 1 or 2 things. Whenever you're on, for sure. I mean, I think I'm not an expert by any means, and I don't class myself in any way. I am just someone who's interested in it. I think I kind of have a good grounding in it. I learn stuff each time, and when I speak to other people who have been Freemasons for a lot longer, people that think I wouldn't say know it all, but know a lot more than me, they still learn quite a lot of it. So you really are a fountain of knowledge. And it's genuinely,
but we're all learning, aren't we?
Oh, definitely. And it's really great that you're willing to come on and help spread that knowledge. I know most of the listeners to In the Chair are people who actually are already Freemasons, but there are also people out there who aren't Freemasons. Some of them who want to find out a bit more stumble on this, and especially some of these ones that we're doing, because we're talking about more about Freemasonry and the history of it. These are some of the ones that people go back to listen to, in the future. It might be in, a couple of years' time, someone's online searching into Google about the history of Freemasonry, and they find this thing called In the Chair Masonic podcast and an interview with you, and they start listening to it. So, what we're talking about now really, hopefully, not only inspires people who are Freemasons, but also want to find out more, and they might be potential members or just people that want to find a little bit more out about who these funny people are that they've heard rumours about. And I'm hoping by us actually being open and talking about the history of those sort of things, it might even be dispelling any sort of myths or things that they have. So, and I think it comes across as genuine, that we're not trying to have some sort of agenda to cover things up, because we're just so open about it and chatting about what it could mean and the things that we don't know as well.
Yeah, I hope that's the way it comes across, because that's the way it is.
That's the way it is. And I think that actually sometimes, I'm sure that must disappoint some people when they find out that's pretty much, what it is sometimes. But no, there's actually, there's a lot more if people want to dig into it and find about it. So I really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully you'll come back on again, at some point in the future. And I always think whenever you're on, I know you always say we're meant to have a bit of a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge, but I think whenever I've sort of spoken to you, I've had a week's worth within a half-hour chat.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Rob. Thank you very much.
No worries. It genuinely is appreciated you coming on here. I'm sure all the listeners appreciate it. If anyone, obviously likes it, do let me know. You can go on to, obviously, Twitter. It's Masonic Podcast on Twitter, or go on to the website. It's masonicpodcast.com. Each of the episodes, actually all of the episodes, have got little comments on there. So if you want to leave any sort of comments, let Ruben know about any of your thoughts, because quite a lot of this is our interpretation of it. And it's quite funny that we can have one idea, I have one idea, you have another idea, a third person can come along and go, no, you're both wrong, it should be like this.
Yeah.
and interpret their lessons in a different way. So if anyone's got any views on that, please, let me know. That's how we learn, and that's how we evolve, by being open and interpreting our own things. So, Ruben, I will let you get on. So for all the listeners, please say thank you to Ruben Ayres. And once again, Ruben Ayres is from St George's Lodge that meets in Exeter. He's from the province of Devonshire, and of course he's the provincial Grand Orator for the province of Devonshire as well. So Ruben, many thanks once again for coming back onto In the Chair, and hopefully I'll speak to you again soon. My thanks once again to Ruben Ayres, and I'm sure you, like myself, found that very interesting. It was a great conversation, and when I was listening to it back, I picked up on so much more that I'd even missed the first time around. And you can really see there's, quite a lot to be taken from it. And for something which is mentioned, but just sort of always passes by through the ritual, we don't really delve into it. You can see that there's actually so much more. And it's not just a pivotal, fundamental part of Freemasonry, but there's also, you could say, a bit of a pivotal and fundamental part of being a proper human being. So, next time you're sort of like out and about, do bear in mind about how you are using those liberal arts and sciences, not just in lodge, but in your everyday life. So, thanks once again to Ruben Ayres, who, as I mentioned there, he's currently the provincial Grand Orator for the province of Devonshire, and his lodge is St George Lodge, and they meet in Exeter in Devon. So really big thanks to Ruben. He is a big supporter of the podcast. He's often sort of like retweeting it and letting people know and telling people about it. And not just that, he's also going out of his way to come back on and to talk, because I know that so many of you, want to find out more about Freemasonry, and he is a fountain of knowledge when it comes to that, and he's got such a good way of putting it across as well. As he's always, obviously more than welcome on any time to come back on the show. And I know the ones when Ruben's on there actually do get loads of downloads. Actually, I want to look at the stats. His are some of the quickest downloaded ones, and the ones that do continually, people do come back, as well as actually one of the top ones was right at the beginning, which was Rick Smith, when we were talking about back in episode number 3. when we were talking about obviously learning rituals. So it seems that the listeners to In the Chair do obviously like to find out about the history of Freemasonry and improve themselves on this. So that's great to know, which kind of brings me on to my sort of announcement, which is, as I alluded to at the beginning, episode 32 is going to be the end of series 1. Now, I'm hoping it's not going to be an end of In the Chair. I do want to keep this going. When I started it, I didn't really have a game plan in mind. It was like set up a podcast or arrange some interviews and just see where it went. But some of the things that I wanted to do, I couldn't do for certain restrictions. I wanted to get around. I wanted to be doing more visiting and more sort of reporting from, lodges up and down the country when they were having events, and just generally try to be out there and sort of interact a lot more with the Freemasons and not just sort of like be having the Skype interviews. And there's also a bit annoying because there's people that I really wanted to get on. For example, I think I've mentioned it before about the new Masonic charities. Back last year, I was having conversations with them, and then they put it on hold. And I'm trying to say to them, look, over 30, I think it's about, as of today, like 33,000 unique downloads of the podcast. And, with a whole listenership around the world, not just the people who read Freemasonry Today, but the whole out there. And it's a great platform to put their message out on, and I've love to get someone on that. And unfortunately recently they haven't replied to any emails or tweets or anything. Just sort of, it seems a little bit odd, and I need to really try to push things, but unfortunately I'm running out of those resources to do that. Also, I'm going to be going into the chair myself for a second year. I'm going to be staying in the chair of Kennet Lodge for a second term. And as this was going to be just called In the Chair, it was going to be sort of cataloguing my year in the chair. It ran alongside my blog that I was doing as well. I kind of, in the back of my mind, thought this was just going to be a one-year project. I'd love to do a second series of this. I mean, you've already had 32 of these, which are completely free. At the moment, I have picked up the tab for this. At least, coming up on 35,000 people have downloaded this, and I've picked up the bill for it out of my own pocket. Unfortunately, if we're going to want to continue with series 2, I just cannot justify continuing. That's going to be the problem. I'd love to, I just cannot justify it with the resources that I need to put in for it to continue. So I did consider making it a subscription thing where you had to actually pay in order to subscribe to it. The problem is within the chair, I don't just want to talk to existing Freemasons. I don't want to just be preaching to the choir, as they say. I want to be talking to new people and people who are interested in finding out before joining. And that sometimes happens. I do get emails from people who have said that they'd listened to In the Chair, they'd been considering joining, looked around on the internet, found the podcast, and then actually found that they were finding out a lot about Freemasonry, and not just the spiel that tends to be given, but actually finding out about the people and the characters behind Freemasonry, who they really are. And that really then actually opened up their eyes to what Freemasonry actually really is about. Not just the things on those main websites, on those front pages, but not the standard Q&As that are normally given, but finding out really about who makes up the membership of Freemasonry, which is exactly what the aim of In the Chair is for. And I realised that if it was a subscription service, then those people wouldn't subscribe to it, they wouldn't listen to it, they'd never hear it, and then Freemasonry might be something where they're not too sure, and then the whole thing would pass them by and they would never join, and they might be perfect for it. So I didn't want to do that. So unfortunately, I do need to try to raise some funds. Not much. If you think of the grand scheme of things, it's not actually a large amount, and I'm trying to give people back. I'm not just trying to do a random donation. I do want to give people something in return. So I've set up a Kickstarter project for Series 2. The best way to find that is if you go onto masonicpodcast.com/Kickstarter. I'll pop links in the show notes, and obviously I'll be mentioning those links are already on Twitter. You can find that by going onto Twitter. It's Masonic Podcast on Twitter. Go onto the website masonicpodcast.com. There'll be links on there to show you through, and there's a whole range of different, I'd say, packages or ways from donations, just from pledging £2, and all of these are that's a minimum amount, so you could increase that. I'm also going to be selling some lapel pins, so you can buy a lapel pin or some cufflinks, and if you're international, it will translate that from British pounds into your local currency. However, with the cufflinks and the lapel pins, if you're international, then postage will be added. But if you're in the UK, the amount you pledge will include the post and packing. There's the minimum ones on there, so you can have those little projects and little products to help you not only supporting the chair, but hopefully promote it to others. And then there's also the ability to do advertising and sponsoring, and maybe just put a short message on. So I've got some different bands for people. So if you have a product, and it doesn't have to be about Freemasonry, it could be that you have an event coming up that you want to publicise, a ladies' night. It might just be that you want to have a personal message and just let people know that you are supporting in the chair. So at the end of an episode, I can just read out some credits, and I am limiting those as well. So it's not like going to be a whole run of credits. I'm just going to be limiting to how many adverts and sponsorship things that there actually can be. But the reason I'm doing that is that will actually allow me to recoup some of the cost that I've already had to put in, as well as then pay for some of the new projects that I want to be doing for Series 2. I've already got some things lined up for it, and some interviews already in the side, but there are some other things that I want to be doing which unfortunately will cost me money to actually do. And the other thing as well is I'm not just going to be pocketing the money. The surplus money is then going to be getting spent on advertising, on Google AdWords and Facebook advertising. So if people are looking to find out about Freemasonry, not only will there be the standard sort of things come up in their normal search results, hopefully they'll then see links to the podcast. So instead of just seeing that, as I said earlier, the standard sort of pages, hopefully they'll then find out about the podcast as well. So then they'll actually find out more about the human side of things, as I already mentioned just now. And of course that will then mean more listeners to the show. So that would mean if you were to be one of those people who did want to sponsor the show and you'd have something that you wanted to promote, then of course that would mean there'll be more people to listen to it. So hopefully it'll be a bit of a self-perpetuating sort of thing where there's more sponsorship will allow more listeners, which will enable more. And you can see where that's sort of going. So I don't want to be doing it. Obviously, I try to put this out completely free of charge. But fundamentally, unfortunately, I am limited. I don't have limited time and I don't have limited resource. Well, no, I don't have unlimited time and I don't have unlimited resources. They are finite. And I know I've spoken about that before. I'm not trying to be greedy. The amount need to be raised is actually a minimum of £2,000, which isn't a huge amount when you look at how much other podcasts are trying to raise. When you consider that's going to be, and that will be for a defined run of 20, could be more, but it will be a minimum of 20 podcasts that would be coming out every other week, starting again in September of 2016. So I'd already be planning it and already working out what those are going to be. So if you were to be donating just a £2 pledge, that would mean that each of those new episodes would only be working out at 10 pence each. And actually that would be for Series 2. There's already 32, including this one, already 32 episodes already out there. So in actual fact, if you were to be pledging £2, in total you would have the 32 from these ones so far, plus another 20. That would actually be 52 episodes of In the Chair that you would be having for just £2. So that would work out at less than 4 pence each. So of course, if you are thinking that you do get any sort of value, please do a donation. You can of course increase the amounts. The amounts on that Kickstarter page are just minimum. Just again, so as I mentioned that, it's masonicpodcast.com/Kickstarter, and that will redirect you through to the Kickstarter page where you can see all the different rewards, all the different levels. And as I said, I'm not just trying to do it so that you would just get nothing. If you do some of the other levels, you do actually get something in return, whether it's a physical product or whether it will actually be some sort of advertising or promotion on there. And on there is also a little video as well where it goes through. So I hope I haven't bored you with that. I don't want to be too beggy or preachy or anything like that, but genuinely something does need to be done in order for this to continue, and not only continue but for the existing ones to remain, because what will happen otherwise, and it is black and white, if the £2,000 isn't raised by pledges, and none of the money would be taken unless, so if you were to go on there and pledge maybe to sponsor one of the podcasts, if we don't raise the minimum amount, the shows won't happen. It really is black or white at that. And of course, if that doesn't happen, then of course you won't get taken. The money would only get taken off your credit card once the minimum total has actually been pledged. So I wouldn't be getting money. It literally is black or white. It's binary. We either get that and we do it, or we don't get the minimum amount and it doesn't happen. The problem would also be is the hosting then wouldn't be renewed. So these existing 32 that have already been put out there will end up probably just getting taken off the internet as well. So maybe if anyone has already got them, have them saved, but it would mean any new people looking wouldn't find them. So I obviously don't want that to happen. It wouldn't take a whole lot of you, considering the podcast has, each episode has well over 1,000 listens to. I don't know the number of subscribers because, of course, there's so many different platforms on Stitcher and iTunes, and some people just listen through the website. But I know that that runs into the hundreds. But please don't assume that just because there's hundreds of people who listen, that someone else will. I mean, if every single person who listened just gave £1, which is actually beneath the minimum amount, but just £1, we would absolutely storm that minimum amount, cover the costs. I can then have actually more money, which I'll then be able to put in and maybe even do more than those extra 20. So I say that because I don't want to be begging, but it really has got to that stage where something really needs to be done. And this is such a fantastic resource. I get so many great comments from people. It genuinely would be a shame to lose it. So please do bear that in mind. As I said, masonicpodcast.com/Kickstarter. Pop on there. Please make your donation. Let other people know there is a limited time. It goes up until somewhere around about mid-July. And if the money's not pledged by mid-July, money won't be taken, but it will mean that the Masonic Podcast in the Chair will no longer be in existence. So I've been Robert Bone. Please let people know about this. Make sure you're subscribed. Tell people about it. Everything is greatly appreciated. And hopefully there will be a next time. And hopefully this won't be the last one. And fingers crossed, I will talk to you again in Series 2. Fingers crossed. Please let everyone know. And I'm hoping this won't be a goodbye.
In the Chair. Visit masonicpodcast.com to see the show notes and in-the-chair.co.uk for more resources to help you get the most out of your Masonic journey. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by rating and reviewing it on iTunes. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Twitter at Masonic Podcast.